A Jacksonville civil rights leader will be speaking before a UN Human Rights Committee in Switzerland next week. Ben Frazier is the founder of the Northside Coalition of Jacksonville and has been one of the most vocal activists against several recent laws passed in Florida, including one dealing with protests. News4Jax reporter Joe McLean spoke with Frazier about his message to the international panel. Joe.
Frazier mentioned several recent Florida laws, which he described as violations of human rights. And he specifically called out last year's HB1. That one is also referred to as the anti-riot law. The group Ben Frazier founded, the Northside Coalition, is one of those suing the DeSantis administration over last year's HB1. The law raises the penalty for violence, burglary, looting, and property damage during protests, and also says that anyone taking part in a peaceful protest that turns violent is also responsible. Frazier says, and the case argues, that this law restricts free speech.
What we're saying with HB1 is, A, it's ambiguous and vague, and a violation of our First Amendment rights to protest and to assemble. That's basic.
Aside from the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Frazier said the law also violates an international treaty ratified by the U.S. in 1994. It's called the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Sponsors argue that the law, which was passed in response to the worldwide protests of the death of George Floyd, doesn't technically say anything about peaceful protests, and it's only meant to punish those who act violently. Next week, Frazier will travel to Geneva to address a UN committee saying the same anti-riot law targets racial minorities. And
one thing is that this law does is it chills the right. It frightens people from wanting to go out and utilize their First Amendment rights.
By chill, Frazier means that the law doesn't outright ban protests, but effectively makes people think twice before taking part in even a peaceful protest for fear of inadvertently violating the law. That, Frazier says, is where the restriction happens.
We led thousands of people into the streets because we were angry. We recognized that there was a need for police reform. The governor didn't like that. Well, why not? It is American, it is democratic to utilize and exercise our First Amendment rights.
Frazier said that same type of chilling effect applies to the recent laws that were passed regarding how sexual orientation, gender identity, and American history are taught in schools. Reporting live, I'm Joe McLean, Channel 4, the local station.